Hey, what do you think? Like the shirt? Saw Oklahoma State was selling these a couple weeks ago, picked one up, and it felt like a fitting shirt to wear today, one day after learning the news that legendary coach, legendary wrestler, icon of the sport internationally, John Smith, is retiring as head coach for Oklahoma State. A storied career. And the word legend does get thrown around. It gets thrown around a little indiscriminately, if you ask me, but it is the most appropriate word for John Smith, who in his competitive career was a 6-time world and Olympic champion, never been done in American wrestling history. And then he goes on to have a storied coaching career, 33 seasons, almost 500 dual wins, 5-time team champions, 33 NCAA champions, 150 some All-Americans, I believe. On and on you could go. You could list these accolades, and he has done such a fantastic job for the sport. He and his family, the sport of wrestling is truly indebted to what the Smiths have done within the sport. So congratulations to Coach Smith. And with that comes a huge question, is who is the man that will follow Coach Smith? Who is the next in line? Who is going to be the next head coach of Oklahoma State? And first question, if you want to answer it truthfully, if you want to, actually get the guess right who it's going to be, you want to answer some other questions. One, will Oklahoma State look outside of the cowboy wrestling tree? I believe the answer to that question is no. They have historically not done that, and I'm not just talking about at the head coaching position. If you look at their staffs through the years, it's almost all Cowboys. In fact, I kept looking back through and through their rosters and their coaching staffs over the years. Couldn't find a non-Cowboy in the last 10, 15 years that was on staff. And I'm not talking about the head coach. I'm talking about the volunteer assistant, the associate head coach, the assistant coaches. It's been almost all Cowboys. That is something that Oklahoma State clearly prioritizes and values. They want guys that have been Cowboys. They want wrestlers, former Cowboys, to come back to Stillwater and coach. That's something that they have consistently done. And so with that, you have to think they're not going to deviate from that. It's going to be someone kind of in that Cowboy family, because there's obviously plenty of great head coaches you could be looking at. But I don't think that's in Oklahoma State's DNA. I think they're going to keep it within that Cowboy tree. So who is in that tree? Who are those potential candidates? I'll start with those that are not already in Stillwater, right? First phone call you would think would go to NC State head coach Pat Popolizio. He went to Oklahoma State. He's won a trophy at NC State, a program that was in the gutter, that he resurrected truly. And he came in and has done and made NC State a perennial powerhouse, a team that is consistently in the top 10, a team that is consistently in that trophy conversation. They recruit well, they develop well, and Pat Popolizio is regarded as one of the top coaches in the country, and he's a Cowboy. But the question is kind of twofold. One, does Oklahoma State reach out to Pat? And two, does Pat take that call? Does he give it strong consideration? Because you talk to people that know Pat, he's really happy in Raleigh. He loves NC State. He's an East Coast guy. He's from New York. He has deep roots there. And he's also been able to show, hey, I can actually beat Oklahoma State. He's been able to do that and do that multiple years. He's beaten Oklahoma State 2 out of the last 3 seasons. He's got dual wins over Oklahoma State. So if you're Pat Popolizio, maybe you're thinking, well, I'm really happy here. I'm winning here. And I've been able to beat them already. So do I really need to go there? Now, that said, it still is alma mater. And there's still some things you can do at Oklahoma State that I don't think you can do many other places from a budget situation, donor base, et cetera, et cetera. There's just something special. And let's call it what it is. Oklahoma State is the most storied program in wrestling, in NCAA wrestling. There's nothing like it's the standard. Now, it's not the best team. It's not the best program right now. That's not what I'm saying. But on the whole, it is the most storied program. And with that comes some benefits that can't be discounted. So Pat may listen. He may not. Will he get a phone call? I'm not sure. He should. He certainly should. But I don't know if he would listen. I don't know if he would go. That's what it has sounded like. Chris Pendleton, Oregon State, done a fantastic job there. Multiple All-Americans. He's taken that program from, it was really struggling towards the end there with the previous staff. And Coach Pendleton has injected life, not just on the wrestling mat. He has reinvigorated that community. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do anywhere. And it's something that we've seen Coach Pendleton do. They're wrestling well also. So he was a two-time NCAA champion for the Cowboys. So it would feel like he would be considered. Neil Ayersman, Little Rock. At this point, after what you've seen him do at a brand new program, Little Rock, it didn't exist. He's wrestling in a state, or he's competing in a state that really has very, very little in the way of a recruiting base. You can't say, all right, we'll just get the Arkansas guys. So he's got to look outside the state. It's non-tradition rich. They have a weird conference alignment with the Pac-12, and it just doesn't matter. Coach Ayersman has just put together a really tough team, culminating with a top 20 finish this year. And it's, some coaches and programs can get an added benefit it can kind of like cover up some blemishes. When you get a couple guys on the podium, it's like, oh, we're a top 15, we're a top 20 team. Meanwhile, you look at their duel records and they're getting smashed routinely. Look at Little Rock's duel records. This is a team that is winning big duels, is competitive in duels. It's not just Nasir Bailey and Stephen Little having standout performances in NCAAs. They are a competitive team top to bottom. And that's something that if you had asked best case scenario for Little Rock, I would not have thought this. I would not have thought Coach Ayersman would be able to get him to this level. And the speed at which he's been able to do it also should be lauded. So Neil Ayersman should definitely be in consideration. He was a starter for Oklahoma State. And you got to look at him. He's the reigning NWCA Coach of the Year. And that's a tough accolade to receive. Who else? Mark Branch, Wyoming. He was someone who was often, and through the years, probably, I feel like the last 5 or so years, every kind of offseason, you kind of get the murmurings of, hey, maybe John, it's getting towards the end. He's thinking about retiring. And then you always do okay, well, who do they reach out? And Mark Branch was always a name that was in the mix, and for good reason. Coach Branch done a really nice job at Wyoming, consistently getting guys on the podiums, had national finalists there, competitive dual teams, and of course, he was a national champion at Oklahoma State. He's from Oklahoma, and for that, you would assume he would get some level of consideration. But ultimately, it feels like the writing is on the wall here, and that Coleman Scott is going to be the next head coach at Oklahoma State. Now, if you go back 1 year ago, Coleman made the move from head coach at North Carolina to the associate head coach at Oklahoma State, his alma mater, a place where he won national titles, where he was an Olympic bronze medalist. Just a fantastic career and a fantastic Cowboy. And he came back last year, and a lot of people thought, you don't see, UNC is regarded as a really good job. And so you wouldn't assume he would make the move from a head coach to an associate head coach if he didn't have some idea or some thought, this could be I could be the head coach here eventually, right? That was what everyone thought. He's the next in line. And after 1 year, Oklahoma State had a really nice season, and the NCAAs may not have finished how they wanted, but you can't just boil down a season to how NCAAs goes. That's a little reductive. Look at how competitive they were in duels, how many big dual meets they won. They went to NC State and won. They went to Missouri and won. There are some other big dual wins in there. They're just the life, the excitement, there was just vibrancy about this team at Oklahoma State and what they did. And so even though it was a 10th place finish, everyone knows the 2 through 10 was separated by just a hair. So they showed good signs of life last year, right? From the previous year where they finished 18th, and it was like, whoa, this is sort of an eye-opening performance for Oklahoma State to the negative. The ship gets righted a little bit, right? And you've got Coleman Scott. He's young. He has head coaching experience. He's there. And it would seem that, and this is another question. So I said there's a question. Will they look outside the tree? Will they look outside of Stillwater? And here's another question. Where does John Smith throw his blessing? That has to have significant weight. And it's hard for me to envision Coach Smith not endorsing Coleman Scott as the head coach. It feels like that's the direction this is going to go. And you can certainly understand why that would be the choice that Oklahoma State makes. So that is honestly my read on the situation. I think Coleman Scott is going to be the next head coach at Oklahoma State. There is a process involved. Like, they can't just name him the head coach. It has to be open for 5 days, and there's some HR stuff that, has to be adhered to. So don't expect an announcement within the next, it's not going to come on Monday, but some days down the line. My guess is it will be Coleman Scott. And so then what's the fallout from that, right? Because there's still going to be an opening at Oklahoma State. If they slide up Coleman, who do they slide into his role? Now, my thought is Coleman taps someone he's tapped previously to join him as a head coach, Neil Arisman. If you remember back, before Neil was at Little Rock, he was at UNC with Coleman. Coleman brought him to Chapel Hill, and they coached together. Now, seeing what Coach Arisman has done, I think it would be a dynamite hire. If Coleman can land it, if Coleman can get Neil to leave a head coaching position to be the associate head coach at his alma mater, Oklahoma State, I think that's the move to make, because I think Coach Arisman is just, his reputation in the sport is incredible. You combine that with what Coleman has done as a wrestler and as a coach back at UNC, and now what he was able to kind of establish this year at Oklahoma State. That feels like the direction Oklahoma State's going to go. That's just my guess. I don't know. I don't have any ties to the Oklahoma State administration. I don't know. I'm just basing this solely on how I've seen Oklahoma State operate in the past and what I see as the most likely scenario. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think it's going to be Coleman. I think he's going to try to get a big name that can complement him and help him as they look to get Oklahoma State back in that top 5 status. So either way, huge shoes to fill for whoever comes in. We'll keep you posted, but I'm curious what you think. Who should be the next head coach at Oklahoma State?